So, especially at this time of year, there's bugs all around us or
Yes.
infectious pathogens. So why is it that some kids or some of us even
Yep.
come down with every bug about and others just don't? Others sail through winter and
Yep.
get nothing.
Yeah. Well, it all comes down to our immune system, actually. You know, the single most important barrier between you or your child and most winter bugs is our own immune systems. So today we thought we would discuss ways to support the functioning of our kids' immune army and hopefully help you to keep your kids well this winter. So my first tip, always start with the basics and always start with food, and that is just feeding them a variety of seasonal local whole foods. This is just foundational, you know, foods that are in season specifically and if possible locally grown as opposed to something being imported from the other side of the world is definitely the most nourishing choice always. So, you know, here in Australia, we're really blessed with an abundance of fresh produce. I don't think, unless you've lived overseas and you've seen how everything in every supermarket is imported, you don't realise just how fortunate we are here in Australia. So, you know, look, there's really no need in our country to buy imported food. If you're listening from a country that, you know, you unfortunately can't source locally grown food, then the next important thing is that it is fresh whole food. You know, that is the most important thing. Shopping at farmers markets, if that is, again, available to you, is 100% the simplest way to ensure that you're eating food that's at its absolute freshest. It most likely hasn't had to travel very much and therefore it's going to retain the most nutrition. All of the fruits and vegetables that are in season in wintertime at this time of the year are immune supportive, believe it or not. Nature always knows best. Things like an apple, you know, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Citrus fruit is in season at this time of the year. And, you know, I always recommend not just using the juice or the flesh, but if you're making something, to use the zest as well off lemons is really, really immune supportive.
I learned that from you. Got
my
little
zester out.
Use it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if you're able to, that's definitely something that to include in, you'll see in a lot of my recipes, I'll often include zest, and it is partially for flavour. Just if you are zesting something, it's the coloured part is not going to be bitter. It's when you get to the white pith, that's the bitter part. So you probably don't want to include that because it does impart quite a bitter flavour. Green leafy vegetables, if you grow your own produce, you know in wintertime there is so much green leafy stuff. Like every winter, that part of my garden just goes crazy. It's something that grows with absolute abundance. If green leafy vegetables are kind of something that your kids at this point in time, it will change if you stick with us and continue listening to our awesome podcast. But green leafy vegetables, I know for a lot of kids are a bit of a sticking point. Pesto, I think, is a really great way to get greens into kids.
Yeah, I agree.
I've got a nourishing pesto recipe on the website that's not just basil. Like I've kind of extended it beyond the basil, again, just to help parents to introduce even more variety into their kids' diet by something that they already like. And a lot of kids love pesto.
Well, and I'm thinking if they help you make it and they see the greens go into it, it helps with them tolerating the leafy greens later on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important. You know, nature has given us these foods for a reason. So definitely tucking into the finest season's produce is a really important strategy just to stay well in winter. Kiwi fruit actually is another thing that is definitely part of my own family's kind of immune strategy. It's one of the richest sources of vitamin C and just so perfect for winter. If you can tolerate the skin. My kids love the skin. They actually never peel a kiwi fruit, but I know I get questioned when I show pictures of their lunchbox and it has an unpeeled peeled kiwi fruit, and then people are like, do they eat the skin? Actually, they do.
Yeah.
They've just never known any different. I've never peeled it. So, that's just what they know.
And I always wonder, just what the benefit of the skin.
Yeah,
because it's
absolutely.
got that kind of...
But even if you peel it, it's still an amazing fruit for them to have at winter time. The next thing is super important, and that is including protein. You need to really knuckle down on protein intake over the winter months. Yeah. Your child's body uses protein to build new cells for growth. So, most children are growing, sometimes very rapidly, sometimes not so rapidly. But even our immune cells require protein to rebuild and to repair. So it's something that is happening in all of our bodies all of the time. Our immune cells are continually repairing and rebuilding. So we need to eat protein. It can't be stored. Protein cannot be stored. So in order for your kid's immune system to really function at capacity and its absolute best, they need to be eating protein pretty regularly. In clinical practice, it was definitely very common for me to see children who were frequently getting sick and they were lacking protein in their diet. It was a very, very common thread. We spoke about this at length about protein at length in podcast 3. So if you do need more tips about getting protein into your kids' diet, then perhaps revisit that podcast. Just last year, my son has, as I said, gone through his life all kids get sick, but as I said, not getting sick and not staying sick. Like, he'd get over things pretty quickly. Yeah. And it wasn't that frequent. But last year he was getting sickness after sickness. Again, nothing serious, nothing that lasted for a very long time. It was more the frequency, and I was thinking, this is really unusual. Like, he's been sick more in this 1 year than he has in his entire life probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, it's off the back of COVID. And I think that probably played a part in it. But I also really started thinking about his diet. Not a lot had changed, but one thing that had changed is he was growing rapidly. Like, he went from, I know you saw him and you walked in and you were like, oh my God, he went from being a tall kid to like 6'3" in a very short space of time. Yeah. And he's still growing, I think, but he really shot up. And I thought, I wonder if he's having enough protein. So I started buying like 2-minute steaks and chicken schnitzels and, that he'd have snack on cans of tuna and biltong and meat sticks. And all of a sudden that one switch in the diet completely changed. He just stopped getting sick frequently. And this winter, so far, he actually hasn't been sick since we upped his protein. Last week was the first time he's had, and as I said, it was a really minor 24-hour cold. And then he was, back at it. Yeah. And he'd been very seriously exposed to someone coughing and sniffing. I would have been shocked if he'd have gotten away with not getting even mildly sick. Yeah. After the exposure that he'd had. But,
it's making me think of growth spurts all through our child's life, hey? And just how their need for more nutrition and protein and just to support that immune system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So it is really important just to really take note of where your child is at in a growth cycle, for sure. The next thing no one likes to talk about, and that's limiting sugar. Sugar weakens immune responses. It increases infection time as well. So sugar is really the number one enemy when it comes to immune function. Yeah. It inhibits phagocytosis, which is the process by which viruses and bacteria are engulfed and literally kind of chewed up by white blood cells. And sugar adversely also affects the good bacteria in our gut, which is a really important part of our immune system, is to have healthy, like thriving, good bacteria in our gut. So they're two very good reasons why we need to be very, very mindful of sugar during winter particularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next thing is treating our gut well. You know, the health of your child's immune system is very dependent on the integrity of their gut. Yeah. About 70 to 80% of the immune function actually originates in our gut. So supporting its health on an ongoing basis is so like critical, really, really important. Yeah. Two of my favourite remedies of choice for supporting kids' digestive systems include bone broth. Surprise, surprise. It is really great for repairing the digestive system whilst also providing tiny bodies with all of the nourishment they need to kind of stimulate strong immune responses. It is so quick and easy to prepare. There is a recipe on the website, but you literally are just throwing bones in a pot, covering it with water and adding a tablespoon of vinegar. You can add vegetables as well, but you're literally extracting all of the goodness from the bone. Yeah. And it's budget friendly. You know, we will buy a whole chicken, strip the meat, cook it, strip the meat off the carcass, and that carcass is used for making bone broth. Yep. We sometimes just chuck it. If I'm not going to make it right then and there, I'll throw it in the freezer until I am ready to make the broth. Yep. And then the other cuts of chicken that are really great for broth are the really gelatinous kind of gristly parts. Chicken feet, which cost next to nothing. Necks, wings are awesome for adding to stock and getting like extracting all of that goodness from the bone. Yeah. It's also really soothing and hydrating and healing for when kids are sick. So, you know, if they don't feel like eating, it's one of the best things that you can support them with. And look, I think it's really delicious as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, if your kids don't like it, I do actually have a blog post of ways to include broth other than just drinking it or adding it to soup. Yeah. But, you know, you can literally add it to anything that you cook, spaghetti bolognese, stir fries.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah, stews, casseroles, curries. Rice, hey? Yeah. I've actually heard of people freezing it into ice blocks and adding it to smoothies. I've never personally tried this. We're not massive smoothie drinkers in our household, but yeah. Anyway at all. Definitely stock your freezer just so that you always have it on hand. Store-bought stocks, unfortunately, unless they are like the really expensive good quality ones like that are freshly made, the ones in Tetra Paks just don't have that same level of goodness. The next thing is probiotic foods and supplements, you know, foods that support the growth of that healthy or good bacteria in your gut. Include things like fermented vegetables like sauerkraut or kimchi, miso, kombucha, kefir, so either dairy or a water or coconut kefir is fantastic, and yogurt, of course, is great, unflavoured, unsweetened yogurt. Targeted good quality probiotic supplements are also quite supportive, especially if your child has had antibiotics. Antibiotics can actually adversely impact on the gut's health for up to 12 months post medication. So to be honest, I feel that most people will benefit from probiotic supplementation, kids included, after they've had antibiotics, just to really get the gut back up to speed really quickly. It's just going to be more efficient, I believe, than the food is definitely important, an important supportive strategy, but in the really short term, if your child has had to have antibiotics, then it is important to follow up with a strain of probiotics. There are different strains of probiotics that are required to achieve various results. And in my fridge personally, we have like a general kind of well-being probiotic. And then we also have, look, at times like that time when my son was having like a bad run with infection, there's also probiotics that are specifically good and well researched for supporting immune function. So we did switch to that. Another strain that I always have is in case gastro or any kind of signs of a stomach ache. You know, we've only ever had gastro in our house twice in all of the years of my kids. It's one thing we've never actually battled with.
We've been the same.
Have you?
Touch wood.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel for us anyway that having an SB strain in the fridge is really important as well. And these strains are sold under like generally like I know Inner Health do, like a gastro support. That would be the one that you buy, but you need to really talk to your naturopath or a qualified healthcare practitioner just for further advice to make sure that you get the best supplement for your child. I can't kind of speak across all of the hundreds and hundreds of different strains and products that are on the market on the podcast. But I personally just use practitioner-only products. In Australia, Inner Health is one that's probably one of the better quality retail brands that are around, that are really widely available. So I generally will direct people to that particular brand if you aren't under the care of a naturopath, but you can ask your chemist about that. Other foods that are kind of particularly beneficial for supporting immune function include coconut milk and coconut oil as well. The principal medium chain fatty acid in coconut is lauric and capric acid, and lauric acid is actually also found in breast milk, would you believe?
Yeah, wow.
Both are really anti-inflammatory, they're antimicrobial, and they're healing to your gut, which again is your first line of immune defense. So they're beneficial inclusions. Obviously garlic, adding it to everything that you cook. Studies have suggested that consuming garlic daily can prevent and shorten the duration of colds, so definitely include that. That's an easy one, I think, to include. Shiitake mushrooms are fabulous for immune support. In herbal medicine, studies have proven that they do have an immune enhancing action, and they're extremely nutritious. You can actually buy them pretty much in most supermarkets these days, fresh. Never used to be the case. I used to many, many moons ago when my kids were little, I would have to buy them dried. And so you still can do that. It's like every supermarket has them dried in the kind of Asian section usually. But most farmers markets, and as I said, even the supermarkets these days do sell shiitake mushrooms fresh. So that's something, to also consider. You would just use them like you would a normal mushroom, cook them exactly the same way as any other mushroom. The other thing that I would say is that in the cooler months, warming foods are definitely best. It's really important to swap out cooling foods like icy smoothies for more warming, immune restorative foods and drinks. In Chinese medicine, this is something that is spoken about a lot, but I definitely support that theory that, if your immune system is struggling or if you're wanting to strengthen your immune system, then warming foods and warming drinks are definitely best. We prefer things like herbal teas over a smoothie, especially things like my immune boosting hot lemon kind of honey drink. And there's a recipe for that on the site. I also have like a chai recipe on the site, which is fabulous in winter. If we did have a smoothie as a family, it's never icy cold. It would be more kind of room temperature. And I always include warming spices to offset. So things like ginger, cinnamon, turmeric are definitely added to the smoothie, just as I said, to offset that naturally cooling nature of the smoothie. Which brings me to herbs and spices, which I just think are the absolute bee's knees. Things like turmeric, cinnamon, chili, sage, oregano, rosemary, thyme, they're all warming. They all contain constituents that are protective against a wide variety of microbes. They have high levels of antioxidants. They're anti-inflammatory. So include as many herbs and spices. I mean, they taste good as well. That's one of the main reasons that I would use them in cooking. But medicinally, they really pack a punch. I feel like we get caught up in these kind of superfoods that we need to pay a fortune for that come from, a million miles away on the other side of the world, and we pay top dollar for them when we just have these incredible superfoods that are available in every single supermarket around the world. They just really do pack a punch, and I feel that herbs and spices really are food as medicine. So in any way that you can add them and include them in your kids' diet, I think it's going to be really beneficial. Manuka honey is also something that is fabulous for supporting the immune system, although it can only be given to children over the age of 12 months.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So if your kids are over 12 months, then it is something that you could perhaps think about putting in your pantry or having stocks of. Manuka has an active ingredient called methyl glyoxal, and it's shortened to MGO. And the higher the MGO, the more potent. So the more potent that honey is, the more of that active ingredient it has in it. And it's that active ingredient that gives Manuka honey its medicinal qualities. So I personally, like, you go with as high MGO as you can afford. Supermarket Manukas aren't active. So you need to go to a chemist to find something that has an MGO of anything kind of over, anything over 100. But as an example, like if I was using like one of the top tier Manuka honeys, would be 1,050, like an MGO of 1,050, and that's most important. The really high MGOs are important for skin conditions, for skin wounds. But, for a sore throat, I often would mix together a bit of coconut oil and Manuka honey, and I personally would pick, something 850 and over would be my personal preference. But I value my health, so I'm not bothered about spending money on Manuka honey. Here in Australia, Chemist Warehouse sell it at a really heavily discounted price. I like the Barnes range personally. Australian Manuka honey tastes incredible. Sorry to the Kiwis that are listening. I believe you do probably better wine than us, and I believe that some of your food and your produce is absolutely out of this world. I'm a huge fan. But Manuka, we do better. Our Manuka tastes better than Kiwi
the
Manuka.
Is beautiful.
Yeah, it's just the first time I tasted Manuka, I was like, I'm not too sure about this. And then I tasted, Australian Manuka, the Barnes Australian Manuka. And sometimes, actually, talking about herbs and spices, sometimes I'll mix in with the Manuka and the coconut oil some like cinnamon and turmeric and ginger, and actually have that as a sore throat remedy. So that's just something else just to bear in mind. Exercise, regular moderate exercise and also exposure to sunlight, so a good dose of vitamin D are really critical for a healthy immune system. It's tempting on cooler days to hit the couch, but wherever possible, if you could get your kids outside at any stage in the day to move and play.
Their lymphatic system moving, that's what kind of...
And just even mentally and emotionally, that's going to support them, if they are, anxious kids, or if there is any kind of nervous system stuff that's underlying immune suppression, getting outside and moving is so important.
So true.
According to the Cancer Council of Australia, in winter in the southern, and this is actually, I'm reading this, in the southern parts of Australia where the UV radiation is less intense, people need about 2 to 3 hours of sunlight to the face, arms and hands, or equivalent areas of skin, spread over a week to maintain adequate vitamin D levels. And vitamin D is so important for immune function. Back to the Cancer Council, people in the southern states may not need sun protection from May to August when the UV index is likely below 3. And we all have mobile devices now that tell us the UV index, so we can ascertain that very quickly. The only exception, obviously, is if you're at high altitude or on a highly reflective surface like snow or water. So, getting outside and without sunscreen in those winter months just to keep your vitamin D levels or your kids' vitamin D levels adequate is important. And for mums, no sunscreen in your makeup over the winter months. Summer months, fine, but winter months is a good idea to switch. Washing your hands, like basic hygiene. We talk to your kids about personal hygiene, washing their hands. I know sometimes it's difficult, but again, I feel like you can build habits around this.
100%.
Like we always had a habit of and my kids to this day do it, is as soon as we walk in, as soon as the kids walked in from school, I just would be like, hand washing, and they'd go straight into the bathroom and wash their hands. Soap actually dislodges, it actually breaks down the membrane around viruses and bacteria, and then also the slipperiness of it dislodges it. So it's just like a basic first line of defense, really, is trying to get used to washing hands. And I know, I'm a parent, I know it's not always possible. My son got in the car the other day after a game of footy where I knew there were kids playing that were sick in the team, but he was starving. And there was no option. There was no option to wash his hands. So, he used his hands to eat biltong and, got sick a week later. Antiseptic gels and, widespread disinfecting kind of sprays and stuff like that. Personally, I don't believe cut it. Often the chemical exposure is counterproductive and kind of damaging to gut health and immune health. But good old-fashioned hand washing, I think, is just way more effective. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on rest. Adequate rest is so important for preventing and curing illness. In our household, I've said it, I'll say this over and over again. At the first signs of being run down, it's straight to bed. And
I'm going to add something there, without a screen.
Yes,
Which is hard with kids. And I say to because the screen's still stimulating. And I get it's hard with kids.
I will compromise with my kids in that they can rest and watch TV. I generally will encourage them to put a movie on or something, so there's that distance, like you said. But I also, it gets to the point, it's like, okay, you can watch TV this morning, but after lunch you're going to bed with the lights are out, the door's closed, and you're going to have a sleep. And they fight me. They fight me every single time. And for me, it's always a gauge of just how sick they are, because if they are actually really sick, they pass out every time.
So true.
Sometimes I'll put on some meditation music or something like that if they want it, but otherwise, I agree with you, to bed, no screen, and actually get a bit of rest, proper deep rest. But look, and I understand that sometimes for parents who are working or running a business, having kids home sick is really annoying. I work from home, so when my kids are home sick and they've got the TV in my work area, it's annoying. But I do know that short-term pain is worth the long-term gain, because they get better quicker. It shortens the overall duration of their illness, and then they're back to school. Another thing I quite like is antiseptic, like essential oils in a vaporizer. If they're sniffly or coughing, I find that really helps them to get a good night's sleep and just clear their head. They're all my kind of tools and my arsenal of things when we're going through these winter months and we're all trying to keep our kids at school and not at home and not unwell. And
just something to add is inviting them to stay warm. Put on a jumper, put some warm shoes on.
Absolutely.
Because I know when my kids were little, they'd be outside with the chooks or something, and they'd have no shoes on.
I know.
And they'd just get cold.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's trying to invite them to stay warm.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that winter is a really great time to focus on your kids' health. Because, like I said, who has time to be sick personally or to be nursing a sick child? Plus my husband's prone to man flu, so it's really in my best interest to keep us all well.
It's so hard that they get it worse than us, isn't
my God, absolutely. Anyway, I hope that helps.